Good afternoon, everybody. I am excited to be here today. I've got a very special guest, my buddy Matt Gielen, who is going to really break down some things that engages with the way the YouTube suggested paradigm works. And if you don't understand what suggested is, we'll get deep into that. We'll talk about some of the ways that that YouTube is actually figuring out how to suggest content to viewers. And this stuff is things that he's covered on his channel recently in a video that was so jam-packed with information that a lot of people watched it and went, I'm still kind of confused. So I said, Matt, come on the channel and let's see if we can break this down even further. So if there's any questions out there about how to interpret the things he was talking about, it'll make 100% sense for you. So if you can hear me okay, if everything sounds okay, shout me out, Mr. Paul Peck right there in the chat. Good to see you. But I won't waste a lot of time here trying to slow the process down. Let me introduce my pal Matt. The video that we're going to be discussing today that he put out was one that was called "How to Get More Suggested Video Views on YouTube in 2020." Matt is a guy who has driven billions of additional views to some of the most well-known channels that we know on the YouTube platform. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Little Monster Media Co. And he's now on the platform actually as a creator and taking a shot at actually making a channel. So he's living in the trenches with the rest of us. So I'm not doing this justice. Hold on. Let me do this better. Let's do it this way. Ladies and gentlemen, the Grand Master of Growth. The valedictorian of views, the Sultan of suggested, my pal, Mr. Matt Gielen.
Thank you. You know, you're going to give Owen a run for his money on introducing me. You guys I should just bring you everywhere. In front of every presentation. Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, if you need me, I'm available. I don't know if there's if you pay by hair volume, but I'm telling you, I'm affordable.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I might steal that for just an intro to all of my videos moving forward. That was phenomenal.
So listen, I want to tell everybody who's following along, there is a questionnaire down in the description. If you have a specific question about how to drive more suggested or anything that we talk about, feel free to drop that down in the questionnaire in the description, and I'll pull some of those up along the way, and we'll see if we can make sure that these complex concepts that Matt has really broken down can get broken down even farther to the point we've just got crumbs everywhere. That's just a crumb trail. So first of all, Matt, you put this video out recently. Like this was I think either your most recent or your second to last, where you broke down what I like to refer as a white paper, but I don't know if we actually call this one a white paper. Can you quickly tell the people who are here today what it was that you were covering in that video and the paper you were referencing?
Sure. So the paper that was being referenced was titled "Recommending What Video to Watch Next: A Multitask Ranking System." Which was written by a number of people from Google about how they built the recommendation system for YouTube in suggested videos and the up next function. It was first presented at Rexis 19, which is essentially a conference about recommendation systems. I think in the video I may be referred to it as a conference for super nerds. I don't think that's a wrong description, but basically it's like every social media platform, anywhere, any e-commerce platform by and large, but definitely like Amazon, those guys, they all operate or at least have systems for making recommendations to people, right? Same thing as like a search, right? Where on Amazon, right, it'll say products related to this product, right? Or frequently bought together. On Facebook, it's what's in your feed. On Instagram, it's what's in your feed, right? Those are all run essentially by recommendation systems, and the people that work on them get together and share their research and share their discoveries so that they can continue to advance the field, as well as probably get patents on certain things to prevent other people from using those things without, getting permission or paying for it.
So the paper itself is really written from the genius minds who actually like build these machines that go ahead and start, like when we watch videos, the stuff that's getting suggested towards us and recommended in certain areas. You know, there's a thing that I always tell people. Everyone talks about like the YouTube algorithm, and I always try to tell them, well, it's not one algorithm. It's a series of systems and functions and many different algorithms that work together with human components and an artificial intelligence. And it's a bigger machine. But I've always said that helping to people to understand how it's built is something that helps creators understand what they might want to pay attention to. Because if you know how your stuff is being promoted or recommended on the platform, and they'll never give us all of the recipe, right? They'll never tell us the recipe. But this is almost like we get a hint at the ingredients. We know what the ingredients are, right? Like if KFC came out and said, listen, here's the herbs and spices we're using. We're not going to tell you what the volume is on each, but I'll give you this, go home and try to recreate it. Then you could go home and try to make your own KFC spice, right? You go like, oh, I know these are what they use. So I think that's what I actually watch. I told Matt, you guys out there, I actually was at the gym on the elliptical, and I'm like, and his video had just come out the night before, and I'm like, oh, Matt's got a new video. I'm going to watch it. I watch it 3 times in a row, and I'm on the elliptical just listening. I'm just like, got the headphones in. I'm like, I'm doing this, and I'm paying attention because I find this stuff so fascinating, because I think a lot of people are out there going, how do I get more views? How do I get more subscribers? And you go, man, it's so much deeper than that. And trying to simplify it begins with understanding what it is you're up against and how the thing works, right? And I've always said, I can recognize a human being from a distance as long as my glasses are on. But if you show me the Human Genome series, I won't be able. I don't know DNA. If you put it in front of me, I don't know what that is. But I can recognize a human. So when you start helping me connect those dots, I understand the platform better. And that's hopefully what we're going to try to do here today is connect some of those dots that you've already distilled in a way that we're like that was already a massive amount of time. When you first got, now was this paper put out in? I saw it about September of last year. It seemed to be pushed out.
Yep.
When you first saw it, and just so people know, let me do this. These are some of the graphs and stuff from what these white papers look like. Let me just show you. This is the kind of thing that we're talking about. Right? This is what some of the graphs and data charts and flow charts look like when they create these papers. And I always feel like, holy crap, what am I going to do with this? That's alien to me. I don't speak that way. But you take these papers and go, well, listen, I'm going to take this and I'm going to distill it into a language that hopefully more creators can understand. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things. Kind of first and foremost, I completely agree. Like, you have to understand the environment in which you're operating in order to succeed in that environment, or at least to be able to have a better chance of succeeding in that environment. And there's plenty of people who just like intuitively kind of get it and go after it and don't really care about it, don't look at the data. But, conversations I've always had with the biggest YouTubers, like, they might publicly and at times be like, oh, I don't really look at the data. And, I just try to make entertaining videos. And then you talk to them and they're like, well, my click-through rate on this one was 5.7, but the impression rate, it's like, dude, you're in there every day. Right?
We are all data geeks at heart, right? We all go like, oh, I've been staring at my analytics. What's that one thing I can look at that I can improve on and get me to blow my channel up?
Most people are. There's probably plenty that aren't. But regardless, like, I released a video that I think is titled something like "How to Play YouTube Like a Video Game," right? And or how to game the YouTube algorithm, which was like, that's about as far as I'm willing to go into clickbait. Because the concept of the video was essentially YouTube is a real-time strategy game, right? And if you want to succeed in a real-time strategy game, you have to understand the landscapes, right? Like, even in like first-person shooter games, if you understand the landscape and the architecture, right, you're gonna have an advantage over other people. And that's what these papers do. They give you hints as to what the landscape is going to look like for you, right? The battlefield of your videos versus other people's videos, right? And this paper was no exception. I think this is the 8th or 9th paper that I've read from the engineers that work on this. But the interesting thing about this one and several of the others was it wasn't necessarily like, here's the architecture we're currently using. It's here's what we built to train the system, right? And what they built to train the system is what gets turned into the actual recommendation system on YouTube, right? So when you load any video watch page, right, there is, by default, probably 12, 15 videos displayed in that right-hand suggested video column, right? Now you scroll, it'll continue to populate more, right? But those 15 recommendations have to be decided by a recommendation system. Mm-hmm. And the way that recommendation system is built and what they reveal in this paper tells you what they're looking at to determine which videos to put there, right?
Okay.
And I think
stay right there for a second.
Okay.
You're like me. You will steamroll right through it, and people go, I was lost at the first thing he said. So when we talk about this, that's one of the things. When you're talking about the way that, now we know that YouTube is owned by Google, so there's sort of some interaction here where we're seeing a lot of the smarts that come from the Google people are now being applied across the YouTube platform, and they're improving YouTube in a way using a lot of things like the Google Brain and the Google AI, so that we start seeing YouTube advance in a way that it wasn't before the purchase, right? Which was still quite a while ago. But they're constantly building and tweaking and trying to figure out what we believe is how to serve the viewer's needs best. While there's probably a bit of, or if not a small bit of, trying to make sure that they drive revenue at the same time. And this is where it gets confusing. This is where I think the magic is there's so many perspectives as, well, what's the goal here? Are we just trying to make people happy? Are we trying to make money? Are we trying to do all of this? And looking at your video, the first thing you had said early on in the video, just getting into it, you said, listen, YouTube uses multiple candidate generation algorithms, each capturing an aspect of similarity between query video and candidate video. And I went, rewind. Hold on, I'm tapping out. Let me hear that again. And it was a very simple thing that you said, because you speak in a language of guys who live at a higher tier than knuckleheads like me that are trying to figure out how to, turn myself into an orange with Filmora. Right? So I always want to learn from the things that you tell me. And it makes a ton of sense. I can get that YouTube uses a lot of different algorithms. It's not one thing that they're looking at. They're combining a lot of different factors to decide what they should serve to people. But let's start really simple. In the video that you presented, you talked about the query video and a candidate video. Can you explain to me what's a query video and what's a candidate video?
So these papers are written by engineers for engineers, right? Which is why it takes a year to fully digest it and be like, okay, I think I get it now. So a query video is the video the person's watching in that moment. And a candidate video is a potential video that YouTube would serve the viewer alongside the video they're watching as a recommended video as to what they should watch next. So query video being watched, candidate video, potential video to serve to that user.
Got it. All right. Because I hear candidate, I think, Trump and Biden. I don't know. I'm not voting for either one. So I'm already out of the conversation. So when we're sitting there, we're talking about two videos. The video that's in front of whoever might be watching, right? And that could be any video, right? Because every viewer is watching whatever they're watching or whatever they're into at that moment, whether they like the video or not like the video. So YouTube is sitting there trying to decide it, at least in terms of suggested, and correct me here, we're really focusing on suggested because there's a bigger umbrella that we talk about, which is YouTube recommendation, which goes into slightly bigger things in terms of notification feed, your home page, browse, things, subscription feeds. So when we say suggested, are we referring to the entire recommendation umbrella, or are we just referring to suggested as a traffic source, the stuff that's going to be next to your video or at the end?
Just suggested as a traffic source. Each thing you just listed is governed by a different system on YouTube at this point, right? So we say algorithm just because it's a carryover, and probably one that wasn't accurate even when we started saying it. When we first started talking about YouTube audience development and how to build audiences on YouTube, we just said, oh, the algorithm. Right. And back then it was probably mostly the same. There's going to be a different system that sends out a notification, but generally your browse and suggested was probably identical or near identical. These days, they are very disparate systems that definitely use the same data, but are fine-tuned in very different ways and are looked at in very different ways for many specific reasons. For example, like your browse traffic, right? That's like 99% homepage, right? So your homepage, when someone opens up the app or goes to youtube.com on a browser, is governed by a system that is not radically different, but very different than the suggested video system, because they have different goals, right? They're looking at different things in the sense of like, browse is going to be more geared towards things that generate a lot of repeat viewing or are very new and fresh, right? Or if you don't have watch history to a viewer, the person you're making that recommendation to, right? The cold start problem of like, we don't have any information on this person. What do we serve? Well, we serve stuff that will be generically interesting. Right. So this particular paper looked at just suggested.
So now, just to hang here for 1 second, I think a lot of people don't realize that there are so many different ways that videos are what we call surfaced, the way that they're presented to different viewers in different situations. There's not just the way that they'll go, here, watch this. There's homepage, there's browse, there's suggested, there's even the way videos are surfaced in search has to do a lot with the data behind that video and how well the audience has interacted with that video. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, search is probably going to be the most different from suggested and browse. But yeah, it's completely different system.
And it was really funny what you just said there about what it knows about the viewer, right? When you come to search and you type in a search term, well, it's really easy to satisfy a viewer because the viewer's going, I would like to see this. And they type those words into search. On something like suggested, which we're talking about today, they are already watching some piece of content. So at least the YouTube platform has an idea of what this person is watching, what might match well as an up next. And they have an idea of where that person is heading. At least they've made an initial choice of I'll start walking this way. But browse is a different thing, right? Because at browses, you just open up the YouTube homepage and they're like, where's this knucklehead going today? What's Daniel interested in today? Let's show him 900 things. And hopefully, some of the things that we're giving him are based on data that he'll be interested in clicking one direction or another, as opposed to him shutting the platform down and going, I'm done with the day. All right, so let me talk about
you asked a question previously that I think is important to address, which is like, what are they optimizing for? Never in a single one of these white papers and everything YouTube has ever said has ever suggested that they optimize for revenue in any way, while at the same time optimizing everything for revenue, right? So the end goal, according to YouTube, according to these papers, is viewer satisfaction. And terminology is incredibly important, right? Because it's not viewer enjoyment. It's not entertainment. It's not, feel good. It's satisfaction, right? Because viewers have lots of different reasons for being on the YouTube platform, right? Like if they're watching, one of your videos and looking for a tutorial, they want to get the information from the tutorial, right? And if you deliver that, right, they will be satisfied by that video. Now, they'll probably enjoy it too, right? You're an entertaining guy, right? But
hopefully.
But like that's the concept behind satisfaction, which is brilliant in its simplicity, right? Because it covers everything basically.
Well, let's hang here for 1 second. When we talk about satisfaction, this is one of the things that your recent video for me came at an angle I hadn't seen before. A lot of us tend to think, well, what makes our videos get recommended, suggested, pushed out there? And we think, well, you got to have a good click-through rate and people have to watch a certain amount of the average view duration or average view percentage of that video. And that, it has to be topically significant, that maybe it's not something so niche that it's out there that people, they recommended it doesn't get clicked again. So we're always looking at these data metrics. But I know this from the inside, from some of the other people I've talked about, the way that YouTube is heading, is that they have discussed this satisfaction feature. What is and you're saying what satisfaction is, but satisfaction, why is satisfaction important over just engagement? If you click it and you watch it, isn't that satisfaction there?
Well, it's a implicit feedback portion, right? But there's other more explicit, like dismissals, like surveys that they want to take into account as well.
Dismissals. What's a dismissal?
Dismissal is when you hover over, like, my thumbnail being recommended next to this video, click the little X button, say not interested, right? Okay. That would be a dismissal. They also look at what people don't click on, right? If they suggest your video several times to someone and, the person doesn't click on it, right? That's a implicit feedback into the machine that you are not interested in, at the very least in that video, potentially not in that creator. And so from that perspective, it's a varied set of feedback that they have to weight in order to make the next best recommendation. So but what I was talking about specifically about satisfaction is like, well, not necessarily how that's measured, but the fact that when you're catering to 2 billion people a month, and it's probably closer to 2.5, that's just 2 billion logged in, right? And there's this little line in the paper, and I'm not sure if this math works, but it said we get hundreds of billions of user logs every day. And they talk about in the paper user logs being like how someone interacts on any page, right? So you're talking about potentially like 6 trillion video views in a given month. Like that is just, and let's say on average, each one of those pages, we'll just say 5 recommended videos, right? So 30 trillion recommendations, like that's insane set.
It's not
like, just think about how you use YouTube, right? Like, or I'll give an example for myself, right? Like my browse feed on like the personal page, not the one that I have to use for work, is basically like NFL highlights, right? Like videos from like you, Nick, and Roberto, right? And then like some late night stuff, because like that's what I click on. And like when I go to YouTube, they're like, all right, is this dude doing competitive research, or does he just want to watch some people get hit really hard, or is he looking to laugh, right? And so like what's going to satisfy the viewer, or me in this instance, in any particular moment, right? They, with every interaction, they get better and better at predicting that, right? Like they're like, oh, okay, well, if it's during lunch, it's going to be, football highlights, right? If it's, 3:00 in the afternoon and this guy's like, oh, I got to get a video done by end of day, right? He's doing competitive analysis, right? Oh, if it's in the evening, like he's looking to wind down and watch some comedy clips, and they'll adjust like which videos are served based on time of day, device, all that kind of stuff. And so like from a satisfaction standpoint, what we mean by that is delivering the viewer what they want in that moment, so that they enjoy that session, so that they come back more often, so they spend longer every time they're here.
And they track that. I mean, they're tracking not just what you're doing this minute, not just what you're doing today, but they're tracking you as a viewer over a very lengthy history and period of time, so that they can better understand you and better understand you as a viewer group, right? Because I think that's one of the other things that sometimes can be really confusing. Like we think we put out videos and we're competing against all of those numbers you just said, like trillions and billions and 83 years of 83 years of videos in watch hours put up every day, and you go, how is it even possible that I can get seen? How's my channel get discovered? But I almost feel like it's the kind of things that you're talking about right here is exactly how you get discovered. The fact that YouTube starts breaking things down, and guys like you and I aren't competing against Markiplier. We're not even on their radar. Well, unless you do a Markiplier video or something. But we are just living in a different area because we serve a different audience than every other creator, not every other creator, but the vast majority of creators out there. And we're just trying to exist in our bubble and be suggested, recommended to the very people we're trying to reach, not everybody who's ever turned on YouTube.
Exactly.
Is that fair?
Yep.
Right,
it's about catering to the audience's interests as expressed through watch history, search history, etc. Sorry.
Let me ask this one question. In your video, you talked about breaking down this paper. You told me like you were talking to me on the Olympic. Daniel, you raise the incline, more resistance, elliptical faster. I was watching, and you basically said, listen, this is what really struck me. You said YouTube is really starting to pay attention to two potentially competing goals, which is that engagement and that satisfaction, right? If you're trying to serve two things, how do we know what's an easy way to understand or what's an easy way for YouTube to understand if we're satisfying a viewer? Are there simple things that are important? Is a like important? Does that mean we've satisfied them? Is a comment important? Does that mean we've helped satisfy that viewer? What are the things that YouTube might be looking at to go, we understand engagement. If they clicked and watched, we can measure that. But how do we measure that they might be satisfied?
Yeah. Well, clicks and watches are a metric that they're looking at for satisfaction, right? So like the end goal is satisfaction, and they used engagements and the other term being satisfaction, which is they're weird camps to put the things that are in each one in, but that's how they were doing it. And it's even more confusing when your end goal is satisfaction, because you're like, well, then wouldn't it just be the satisfaction metrics? But it's like they're using the term twice in two different ways, even though it's the same term. Right. So the engagement metrics, and like when you hear engagement metrics, you think likes and comments and shares. That's not the way they use it here. The way they use it here is about clicks and watches. And in the paper, they even say watches is about basically how long they watch a video. Right. The satisfaction metrics that they list in this video are likes, dismissals, and surveys. There's plenty of reason to believe that shares, comments are also part of either satisfaction or engagement. But I wouldn't say that they're ones that are necessarily weighted very highly as it pertains to the individual user, with comments being an exception within that. So from a viewers interacting with your video standpoint, likes, dismissals, comments is probably in there. Right. From a engagement perspective, it's click rate, right? They click on your video, and average view duration for how long they watched it, in terms of what YouTube is using to determine if that video was satisfying to that user. Right. So I think we have a tendency to think about YouTube from a programmer's perspective, right? Which I think makes sense. We're video programmers, we're video publishers, right? And so we look at the metrics on a video to determine whether that video was good or bad and whether it should get more views or not. And the way we really need to shift our thinking is to it being about the individual viewer, right? Like if you're a growth hacker, right, and you're thinking about it, right, it's less about the video overall and the metrics that you can see overall, and how the individual engage with it. So for example, the likes to dislikes ratio in a video probably doesn't matter all that much.
Stop there for a second. That's a mouthful, because a lot of people say, I got a bunch of dislikes. Why are they disliking my video? Is that important? Does that mean my video is not going to get recommended more often? But you're saying it's just a very small piece of the puzzle.
Yes. What I'm saying is that the way they've built this system means that the people who liked the video are more likely to be recommended your videos in the future, because they've given YouTube an explicit feedback signal that they enjoyed or were satisfied by that video. And the people that dislike that video probably are less likely to be recommended that video in the future. But from a weighting perspective, that's probably less important than clicks and average view duration, in no small part because if you look at the vast majority of content on YouTube, right, you're talking about best case scenario, 15, 20% engagement, comments, likes, shares, all added together, right? The vast majority of viewers on YouTube are non-satisfaction signal sending viewers, right? So like they don't engage, right? So like, you know, from that perspective, it's like, well, what metrics are going to be the most important? It's the implicit feedback ones.
Well, hey, just stay there for 1 second.
Right.
So what you're saying, I'm going to distill this down. What you're saying is, listen, likes and comments and all these things are fantastic, but the vast majority of viewers aren't going to like or dislike or comment or share. They might, or maybe not even subscribe. They might just watch.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, that is a far larger majority of information that YouTube has to work with. Did you click? Did you watch? Than it does. Because I know what you're saying. I'll have a video with 500,000 views, no problem. It's climbing steadily. But I look at the amount of comments, it's like 600. You look at the amount of likes, it's like 1,000. It's nowhere close to the amount of views that video has had as interaction or engagement with real people who were on the other end of it and what they decided to do. Watch it, not watch it, click away halfway through. So is that what we're really trying to say here, is that no matter how much we talk about likes, dislikes, and all that stuff, the vast majority of information that YouTube is going to collect from the average viewer is literally, do they click? Do they watch? How long do they watch?
Yeah. And do they leave the platform? Do they stay on the platform? Do they watch more of your videos? Do they watch, just that one and click away? Right. It's all of that, I think, implicit feedback, the stuff that isn't like, yes, I like this, or, no, I don't want to see any more of this, that is going to drive the majority of viewership on YouTube.
And we've seen that recently, right? Because YouTube has introduced, maybe not everybody has seen it, but every now and then you'll see a pop-up that's like, did you like this video? Give it a rating on X amount of stars, and they will actually review your experience. I take them seriously when they say we're trying to figure out ways to expand upon, I guess we call that the explicit, if the other one's implicit. So the explicit satisfaction, they brought at least in one or two things to try to expand upon that, and we've seen it. So knowing that kind of information, when we're talking about suggested, and I want to keep getting back to how do we get these videos suggested more often? What are the sort of things that, as a creator, if I was a creator and I'm putting a piece of content out there, and I'm thinking about, well, I'm going to have my intro, I'm going to ask people to subscribe, I'm going to ask them to comment, I'm going to ask them to hit the thumbs up and click the bell notification. I'm going to ask them so many things that my content will be buried in between the things I'm asking them to do. Where would you suggest anyone out in the chat room right now, anybody watching this in the replay, like if they're saying, I'd really love to increase my suggested views, knowing what we are starting to learn today from what you're telling us, what's the real important thing that we should be trying to do within our video to get those viewers to potentially get more suggested content from our channel down the line?
Yeah. Well, as it pertains to an individual viewer, getting them to like the video and subscribe to the channel, we've talked with people on the YouTube team, and I think they put out a Creator Insider video that was like, subscribers are great and all, notifications are a very small percentage, but it's good when you get them. And the most valuable time from like gaining a subscriber standpoint is like right after they've subscribed, they're most likely to be served your videos because it's a positive engagement signal, but that signal basically diminishes over time, which makes sense. Still good to get. So from a call to action standpoint, like the video and subscribe are still very good from a explicit feedback standpoint. But the most valuable thing you can do is just get them to watch more, right? Like even if that comes from an end screen or a click from the description or a pinned comment, that makes that video more likely, the video that they clicked on, makes that video more likely to show up in your own suggested videos and also in other people's suggested videos, right? Because it creates a viewership pattern, right? So let's say I watch video A from a channel, right? And I like it, but then I go somewhere else, right? I click close or whatever, come back, start another YouTube session. Well, if a whole bunch of people, not me, had watched video A and then went on to watch video B, YouTube will look at my watch history and say, this viewer has watched video A, and a lot of people who liked video A went on to watch video B. Let's serve video B to him in browse or suggested, right? And so in that circumstance, I believe that I think it's Roberto who refers to it as like viewership funnels or patterns. I'm not sure what the term he uses, But it's, it's a common YouTube phrase where you create essentially viewership patterns, right? Or a set of videos that are meant to be watched together to influence that suggested video views. All that said, like, those are things that can move the needle, right? And it can be helpful. And like, I mean, look, I've seen several YouTubers blow up over the last year, talking about like making, YouTube growth videos and that kind of thing, that have had one or two videos get popped into suggested, and all of a sudden, they've got tens of thousands of subscribers, and they've made videos about that, right? Getting that inertia, that can be one of the ways to do that, is creating that viewership pattern. By and large, though, what we see from a consistent standpoint is that if you focus on click-through rate, right, your thumbnail and your title, right, and you focus on making videos that are very tight, that get great average view duration, right, that's going to be by far the best thing you can do. But let's go back and talk about click-through rate for a second, because everyone talks about titles and thumbnails, right? I always like to talk about programming choice, right? Yes, your programming choice is going to play a large part into what your title and thumbnail are, right? Like, I'm not going to make a video titled "How to Get More Suggested Video Views" and put a thumbnail together that says "How to Get More Suggested Video Views," making my stupid YouTube face, if I chose to make a video about, curtains, right? But more importantly is kind of the thing that this paper showed that has always been true, but is great to see confirmed, which is topic alignment, right?
Define that. Define that.
That's where I was going.
Talk to me like a 3-year-old, Matt.
So topic alignment is essentially making content that your audience is going to be interested in, but other audiences on YouTube are also interested in, and there are videos on that topic currently being watched, right? So you can't get a whole bunch of suggested video views from a video that's about how to get views if you don't have a video that's about how to get views, right? So from a programming choice standpoint, like if you look at the last, I would say half dozen videos that I've done on my channel and the last 2 that Tim has done on the Little Monster channel, right? You'll see that they're all very, very much oriented around topics that are highly specific to people that want to build YouTube audiences, and that there are a lot of videos out there for already. I think we give a different take on some of them. Certainly the one on suggested videos provides a very unique take as to how to drive suggested video views and how suggested works. But the reason, behind that is topic alignment, right? Where we're out there doing the research as to, okay, what is our audience interested in, and what can we make videos about that are going to serve those interests, so that our videos become likely to show up in suggested for more people like that, right? And it's not like, oh, okay, this video is now going to get all the first place placements on this video, right? Because it's viewer specific, right? When we used to think about suggested videos, it would be, my video gets a suggested video slot next to this video for all viewers. And it's not even close to working that way anymore, right? It might be more likely to get a whole bunch of them because they say these videos are very closely related, and audiences that watch video A are going to like video B, right? And these metrics hold up after all that feedback and feedback and feedback. So it becomes more likely, but it's not going to be universal. Like, my video is number 1, right? I've got the number 1 video, baby shark thing. So, I'm now a billionaire, right? Because I got the suggested from the original video. It's individual viewer. And so like, you have to think about it.
But those viewers often can be pooled, right? It is individual, but there are groupings, right? I as much as I feel, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but as much as I always feel like YouTube really does pay attention to the individual viewer. It's impossible to analyze every single video the same way it's impossible to completely analyze every single viewer. So I always feel like, and to correct me if I'm wrong, that the first thing they're trying to do is get you into a group. I just want to make sure you're not Oreo cookies when you're Twinkies. Let me get you into the right group to begin with. And is that a fair assessment? Because I always feel like I'm trying to target an audience that always that I just want to get in the parking lot of the ballpark sometimes before I want to try to get up to the plate. Is that a fair assessment, or am I simplifying it too much?
I think it is easy way for people to think about it. But let me show you how it operates in suggested. Can you pull up that super wonky graph?
You bet I can. Just so you guys know, this is the kind of stuff that Matt got and went, here, let me explain it to you guys, which is really like this. What is this? I don't even know what this is.
That's the architecture. And at the bottom, right?
Let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of this so we can read it a little better.
You see user and context features, right? So what we're looking at is the architecture of the ranking portion of suggested video. So this takes out candidate generation filter, it takes out policy layer. This is the ranking portion, right? And that little yellow box that says user and context features is one part of the input.
This one right over here down in the lower right.
Yep. The second part.
So sit here for 1 minute. User and context feature, time, user profile. So these are all things that YouTube is taking into consideration when it's figuring out what it might want to serve this viewer next, just to get into the top of the funnel, correct?
Correct.
All right. So what is something like user and context features? What does that mean in real English?
So what that means is, one, their watch history, what this viewer has watched in the past, what they've shown that they're interested in. Right. It also takes in demographic information, right? That kind of thing. Time of day, day of week, right? And then also we could easily add in here device geography, right? Things are going to be served very differently to people in Germany than they are in the UK as they are in the US, although the UK and the US are probably going to be more similar than not. Gotcha. Right? That's what goes in there, right? So this information gets passed through to the mixture of experts layer, right? So that's in the middle, right?
Okay.
And what they do within those mixtures of experts is essentially they're making predictions as to the ultimate quote unquote utility, right? Utility is viewer satisfaction overall, right? Because that's what the recommendation system is optimized for, right? And what each one of those experts is doing is analyzing one particular facet, right? And making a prediction as to that facet, right? And so in the paper, they list click through, watch time, time on site, right? They list likes, right? They list dismissals, they list surveys, right? And what those experts are trying to do is say, okay, if we serve this video, this is what we believe the outcome will be, right? And then they rank those videos, right? They take all these factors, rank them, and put them into a list as to what to suggest to the viewer.
Okay,
right?
wait, stay there for a second, because I know for you we're moving slow, but for some of the people out there that are like, I'm looking at this graph and this looks like Chinese. So it takes all of these the bottom tier here that we're looking at is sort of all the things they're trying to understand about the viewer, trying to get an idea of what they're watching right now, what they can gain in terms of information about the actual person who's watching on the platform. And then there's a list, our second tier, this whole middle section with the gating networks and RELU, whatever the heck that means. I don't even know what any of this. How did you even get through this? So now we're looking at this mixture of experts layer that starts really looking at, we must be talking, millions of different systems that are being applied in any given moment for all the amount of viewers that are going on, and trying to understand, now that we know who that is, now we have to take what we know about videos and put a big comb and go, how do we filter how many millions, billions of videos are on the platform? How do we quickly access the videos that this one viewer who's watching this one video, how do we zero that down to what we're calling these candidates, right? What potentially might get served to them to keep them watching longer. Am I even in the ballpark of understanding this over here? Tropical mess that I have going on?
Well, a lot of that's happened by this point, right?
Okay.
So when a page loads on YouTube and they got to make video recommendations, right? Out of the corpus of videos, that's the billions of videos on YouTube, they pass millions to a candidate generation filter, right? And you got to think about the candidate generation filter as like the butcher, right? Just chopping away, it could even be considered like the actual, like the hunter or the farm or whatever.
Is that
this metaphor is getting bad quickly, but yes, that's this.
All right. So the video corpus that we're looking at, when we hear these, this is why I'm here. Like I have to try to learn these words that I know none of them. But video corpus is really the mess of a bazillion videos that are out there on the platform.
Yep.
Now when we talk about this candidate generation, we're really trying to filter that, especially with suggested. YouTube is now trying to factor in things that it can take those billions and get them down to how many are we talking? How many? It says hundreds here. Do they literally take billions down to a matter of hundreds when they go to recommend?
No. Well, they start with millions, right? So like, there's just gonna be some videos where like, ain't nobody want to watch this. Like, don't even pass it to the candidate generation.
Got it.
Candidate generation takes a sledgehammer to those videos and just passes hundreds, all based on the user to the ranking filter. Right. So that big advanced thing that we're looking at is the ranking filter. Right. So if you go back to the other one, that's a very good like general model. Here's how it works. Right. So in the ranking one, the second part of it is the actual information about the video. Right. So what it says down there is essentially they're looking at the aspects of your video as established by other users, right? They say query and candidate video features, right?
All right, well,
so
stay here. Stay here for a minute.
I'm diving in.
So when you say the aspects of that video, one we're talking about, okay, so YouTube is now kind of filtered these things down. They're trying to figure out what videos, if you're watching video X, as we call the query, and we say we're trying to figure out these candidates, what's going to show up next to it on suggested on the side? What might come out at the end of the screen and show up as the up next? When you're talking about all of these different aspects of the candidate, talk to me again like a little kid. What are we talking about when we say the aspects of these other videos? What aspects should we as creators be aware of that YouTube is paying attention to?
Yep. So here they're looking at content topic, right? They're looking at the title. And then upload time. Upload time's interesting, right? Everyone's, probably been on search or browse or suggested and seen that little thing that says like new video, right? So one of the very first things that YouTube said, and I think it's in the same paper as the kind of the simple architecture, was that we regularly, see that viewers prefer fresh content. Right, which is why we still get those new tags, while those videos still get preferential treatment, which means they're getting heavy weighting within this system, right? Which is why they call out upload time here, right?
Stay here for 1 second. Yep. So this is one thing that we talk about a lot with creators, like, small creators, like, how do I stand a chance of being discovered or recommended or suggested against these behemoths that are already on the platform, these guys who've been here in decades? But you're saying right here that one of the factors that's important is how new that content might be.
Yep.
So a smaller channel with that new tag, and we've hinted around this. I've always said, YouTube's not going to tell you, yeah, no, we definitely give you some extra love in that sense, because they're like, well, but would you agree that, a smaller channel with a brand new video is probably going to get, or any channel with a brand new video is going to get a little extra love right when they publish, as opposed to something that has been on the platform for a period of years, regardless of the performance, take that out, but just how YouTube might look at it. That fresh car scent on a new video, it means something?
100%, without a doubt. Okay. Right. It might not be universally true for like brand spanking new channels or channels that just get no viewership whatsoever on new videos, right? Because they got to have some data before they begin serving that video, right? And a lot of times newer channels like are not going to have great titles or great thumbnails, right? Like don't you have to get like approved for custom thumbnails still?
Yeah, you have to get verified
So like in that way, they're kind of like, hamstringing you out of the gate, right? But you can still make fantastic titles and fantastic videos. And in that instance, you will generate that viewership, right? So I think there's, expectation versus reality, which is it's really, really hard for a new channel with no audience to compete for extremely popular and well-known things. Like, you're just not going to show up for Minecraft, right, on a new channel that has no audience and doesn't get a custom thumbnail, and people don't know, they're not familiar with your brand. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Or it takes 12 hours to get your 4K video actually processed in 4K. I found that out recently. I have a dummy channel, and I've talked about this before, but I guess I forget sometimes, because I have this channel that has done pretty well. We've got a pretty good audience here. But I have a dummy channel that a lot of times I'll post stuff up to just send something out to someone to take a quick peek. I uploaded something in 4K. 3 hours later, it was still in like 380p. I'm like, what am I looking at? I can't even send this to the person to get approval. It was a sponsored video. And I had to eventually upload it to as unlisted on my channel. And within 5 minutes of upload, it was in full 4K. One of those advantages of being a channel that's been around and has a bit of an audience, you do get access to some of the features. They do treat some of the bigger creators that have been around and they know more about with a little bit of a priority. I mean, I don't think that's an unfair assessment, at least.
No, and it makes sense. Like, if many more people are going to watch this video, wouldn't you divert more computational resources to that creator and to satisfy that audience, right? Because, like, if you have a choice between satisfying 10 people and 1,000 people, like, generally speaking, you're going to divert the resources to, satisfying 1,000 people. Like, right. Just the nature of the beast. So what we're seeing here is essentially those get passed through what YouTube refers to as a mixture of experts. Each expert focuses on one particular thing, right? And they list them as click-through rate, average view duration or time watched, right? Likes and dismissals, etc.
All right, so let's stay here 1 second. Just again, a mixture of experts is not Einstein and Freud all in a room together. It's literally just metrics by which they better understand the components of that video.
Right. And through that, then that gets passed on to a layer that basically resets those scores based on various biases that they're able to observe on the platform.
All right.
Right.
Now, stop here. You got to explain when you say biases, what are you referring to?
So the biggest example is like click-through rate, right? So if you've got a video that's at the top of suggested for Baby Shark, and your video is called Baby Shark Remix or whatever, right? That video is going to have a artificially inflated click-through rate by being in that first position, right? So
this way, you don't gloss over these things. So what you're saying here is a video that's actually ranked higher in suggested benefits just by the fact that they're ranked higher in that position. So not only do you earn the top position, but it's like the race car driver who keeps winning the races. He gets more sponsors. So you're saying that this is a bit cumulative. So even just being in that higher position, you can benefit click-through rate just by being in a higher suggested position. Did I lose you? Please don't tell me I lost you. Oh, no. Matt is down. He's coming back.
Rich keep getting richer. Daniel, I think agrees out here today. There's like rolling power outages and blackouts and stuff. Give me one to address it.
All right. So listen, if you guys, I want to remind you guys, we do have a questionnaire down below. If you do have questions, we'll be taking them. I'll run through some of these. I know some of this stuff is kind of heady. It really is. Some of this stuff is a little nuts because the language of some of this was confusing for me, even when I watched Matt's video, because it's when you hear candidate filters and mixture of experts, I'm like, what does that even mean right now? But I want to look at some of the questions that we have gotten. I want to take a quick peek at. Some of these are the obvious ones that are like, hey guy, how do I get more subscribers and views? Here's one of the things I want to talk to you guys about. when I was talking to Matt, I actually was looking at another video. It was a podcast from a guy by the name of Lex Fridman, who talked to Christos Goodrow, who's the head of YouTube search and discovery. And he picked his brain about, what is it that YouTube's really trying to figure out when they talk about engagement and satisfaction? And Christos made a great point. And this is the guy who's like the VP engineer, who's heading the search and discovery team. And he said, it's interesting, satisfaction. How many times one of you guys have been up very late and maybe watched a movie at 10 o'clock at night, turned it on, and maybe it wasn't the greatest movie in the world, but you still sat and watched it and let it run for 2 hours or an hour and a half. Even though if I asked you in the morning, like, what do you think of that movie? You'd be like, yeah, it was all right. Well, why did you watch it? Well, it was running and I let it go. And I think that's one of the things that that you have to think about is that when it comes to satisfaction, just because someone has viewed something, someone spent some time watching something, that doesn't necessarily mean that all views are created equal. And that if you watched a whole movie, does that mean it was the best movie out there and that should be recommended to everyone else who might be interested or likes the same kind of movies you do? Maybe not. Maybe it all just depends on that satisfaction layer. And I think that's part of what we're starting to see YouTube incorporate is we've got to take it a step beyond just engagement. Do they click? Do they watch? How much are they enjoying the thing that they watch? And how can we easily measure those things to say, well, I guess that's enjoyment. Is it enjoyment? Because if they watch, that's a measure of enjoyment. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But one of the things that they went on to talk about, Christos from Search and Discovery said, is that we also have to think about how we interpret things like subscribers. And this can be important. I think a lot of you guys sometimes ask me, how do I get more subscribers? Matt's back. I'm going to bring him back in here. But we talk about things like subscribers and how to get that engagement. Sometimes it's not about how many subscribers you have. Sometimes it's about if you can get someone to click the subscribe button while they're watching multiple pieces of your content, that can actually be a metric that helps YouTube to understand the satisfaction level. Did they like it? Did they subscribe? Did they leave a comment? Did they maybe share your video? So there's all these different things that are coming into play when we talk about satisfaction that exist on different levels that can be, it can be really confusing. Matt, I was just kind of riffing while you're in there, just talking about some of the things that we haven't talked about yet. When we're sitting, and let me get back to some basics. Can you hear me okay, pal? Are you still with us over there?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Awesome.
When we talk about factors that might get, because let's bring it, we went deep into trying to get through the candidate filter. So now we have these videos that YouTube has said, listen, we've taken millions and we've reduced them to hundreds. And then out of those hundreds, when we look at any given video that you're watching, you don't see hundreds just based on the screen itself. You can only really see so many videos that are actually show up, right? I mean, we're talking about, what are we really talking about here? We're talking
usually 20 for a scroll.
Right. Let me do this. Let me go this way. We'll if we went over and looked at let me see if I can find your channel over here. Is this it? Here's your video. This is the video we're talking about that Matt made. In this video, there's only on desktop, there's only so many I see in the scroll. And if I went to the end, there would only be so many videos that YouTube is going to put on screen and say, well, here's a dozen videos, right? Here's a dozen videos that you may be interested in if you watch Matt's video on how to get more suggested videos.
Hey, Daniel, do me a favor real quick.
Sure.
Scroll down to suggested.
Yep.
All right, scroll back up.
Looking at the comparison of what they're putting on the end screen versus what they're putting on the side.
Yeah, it's nearly identical. That's interesting.
Kind of cool, right? I mean, but there's still a bit of variation there too. Like YouTube is really trying to figure out what I will watch, because this is me looking at Matt's video. What can we serve to Daniel that might keep him watching next? So that whole candidate filter is all really deciding today. What you're talking about is really everything down on the right side, with the exception of this custom home theater, which is an ad, right? That's someone plays.
I was looking for that one, and I was like, wait a minute, that one doesn't sound right.
No, that's a paid placement. The other ones are very similar.
Yeah.
Which all tend to be like people I've worked with recently. So they just keep trying to understand. I'm the worst to understand because I'm also a consultant. So I'll sit with channels, and everyone I do consulting with, the next day, my whole feed is just overwhelmed with their videos. YouTube trying to understand me as a viewer and saying, would you want to watch more? You spent all that time yesterday watching these videos.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I kind of did.
Yeah.
So listen, let's get back to, but all of that stuff that's being suggested, if we go, all right, we get it. What are the things that, if we're talking about this candidate generation filter, what are the things that a creator can leverage and really pay attention to assist in that process? To go, listen, I get it. There's all these, starts looking at the viewer. It's looking at the video that we're calling the query video, where I want to be a candidate, not for president, just as a video that might be suggested next. What are the things that we now know from looking at these papers that a creator can go, okay, what should I be really leveraging, paying attention to help my videos end up in that suggested area?
Yeah. So number one is absolutely click-through rate, right? You can't get any sort of satisfaction metrics. You can't get any sort of watch time attributed to your video if someone doesn't click on it in the first place, right? And on top of that, clicking on a video is a generally good indication that you are satisfied with the recommendations that YouTube is making, right? Okay. And so in that regard, that's absolutely still to this day, without a doubt, number one. Number two would be trimming the fat out of your videos as much as humanly possible, right? You absolutely have to keep videos as tight as humanly possible, in no small part because we've seen time and time again, right? We've done studies on it, right? Every channel, the better the average view duration, right? Or the tighter the video, right? The better the average view duration. Now, this usually leads into a conversation about average percentage viewed and does it matter and what's a good average view duration and blah, 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 blah.
Hang on there 1 second. So average view duration and average view percentage. I know I'm opening up this can of worms here. Can you quickly, when you're talking to people, because we say AVD, AVP, quickly, can you just explain when we say average view duration versus average view percentage, what each one quickly means and how they are important to this whole idea of helping out the candidate filter and get our stuff near the top as suggested?
Yeah. Average view duration is on average how long people spend watching your video, and average percentage viewed is the percentage of the video that you watched or the viewer watched, right? And the difference between, AVD and AVP is the incredible relativeness of it, right? If you make a 1 minute video that people watch 99% of, you're only getting, 59 and change, right? Seconds of quote unquote watch time. Right? Average view duration, like if you make a 10-minute video and people only watch 25% of it, well, you're still getting 2.5 minutes of watch time, which is, 2.5 times greater than the 1 minute video. Now, that said, with all of the other metrics taken into consideration, that 1 minute video might be far, far, far more satisfying than that 10-minute video, right? So from that perspective, like, what matters more is not the right question to be asking, I don't think, right? Whether it's average view duration or average percentage viewed, right? What matters more is kind of a healthy across the board serving of satisfaction signals, right? And I would
Wait, are you somehow suggesting that I should not be completely fixated on one metric and one metric only?
Yes, okay. I know it's shocking.
So I can't just keep screaming about I've got high CTR, I've got low CTR. What's a good CTR? What's my CTR?
Yeah. Okay. Well, honestly, if you're going to pick one, pick that one.
That's the one. That's the one to go mental on.
But that immediately leads into like, well, I've got a 20% click-through rate. How many impressions? Well, 10 impressions. Like, it's not even like a remotely reasonable sample size of impressions. And by the way, how did you get 22% click-through rate on 10 impressions? Well,
wait a minute. Hold. Stay here.
Math jokes.
You've got to way over my head already. Let me ask. I'm going to circle back to where before I just lost you for a minute. One of the things you were talking about was that that position bias, and we were saying, well, the click-through rate's important, but you're telling me that click-through rate actually gets impacted by where that video might be positioned in suggested. So how does YouTube stop based on these things we're looking at? How is that important to YouTube, and how do they start saying, well, listen, if we just keep suggesting things, they're going to automatically get higher click-through rates? How do we know if they're getting higher click-through rates, if this is a good thing for the viewer because of that's what the viewer's satisfied with, or it's because we just keep pushing them out more?
Yeah, so let's go back to the big graph there.
You got it. Let me get a big graph.
Second paper.
All right, 1 second. Give me a minute. Cool. There we go. Big ugly graph.
All right. So after we go through our mixture of experts, right, that gets put into those two kind of big buckets, right? Yep. User engagement objectives and user satisfaction objectives, which is like the whole point of this paper was to talk about essentially that they're optimizing for two different things here.
So, okay, right? So everything we're learning today was all of this other stuff that we talked about to get through, like the wine filtering, right? We're just trying to make it clear. Yeah. Can I just get the grape, right, the skins out and get all the seeds out? We finally get down to these two big sections, which is user engagement objectives that YouTube's looking at. And to the right of that, back to user satisfaction objectives.
Right.
Okay.
And so like, basically it's interesting because if you think about it, like what they're breaking down here is like YouTube corporate objectives versus viewer objectives, right? A viewer goes to YouTube to be satisfied, right? If they're looking for information, they want to find that information. If they're looking to laugh, they want to laugh. If they want to, be impacted by something, that they want to be impacted, right? So that's what we're getting in the right side. On the left side, what we're getting is what YouTube wants, which is you to be completely hooked on YouTube, right? Gotcha. They want you to come back every day, multiple times a day, and spend all day there watching, right? And so like those two things kind of come into conflict with each other, which is the kind of point of the paper is there's these two big objectives, right? And, most users probably don't want to be addicted to YouTube, but YouTube wants you to be addicted, right? And so you have to balance them, right? Yep. And they talk about this balancing. And so to answer the question directly about click-through rate, what they do in this layer is take into account the position bias, right? The position bias is the position within suggested, right? Where they know if you're at the top of suggested, you're just no matter how good the video is or not, you are going to get a certain click-through rate because of its position on the page. And they did the analysis on that, and they continue to do the analysis on that, and pump that into the overall scoring of the videos, right? Then mix that together in a weighted fashion, right? And they tune and adjust the weightings, right? Or the, as they stated in the paper, manually, right? Like if they see something happening and they want to make a little tiny tweak to it, right? That's how they can do that, right?
Well, wait. Well, hang there for 1 second. And I know I keep interrupting you. You're like, Daniel, would you let me get to my point? But that's a really important thing is, so people are actually coming in, like we have all these systems and algorithms in the AI, but you're saying there's actually people on the other end who are reading this data and going in there and, dialing back the fuel or opening up the oxygen or putting a little more, they're trying to get a little more NOS on it to get it to function the way they want. So is that part of it too, is there's actually real people, while this thing is out there, the algorithm is out there doing its thing, it does come home to roost, and there's people who actually go, okay, what'd you bring me home? What do we have for things that we should look at? And they tweak it?
Sorta.
Phrase that in a way that makes more sense.
It's more like, okay, we've got these 8 factors or 12 factors or 50 factors that go into the final scoring, right? And our click-through rate, let's say, is scored at 50%, right? Or weighted at 50%. They might say, this is leading to too much clickbait. Let's take that down to 45 and spread that other 5 out on, watch time and likes and repeat viewing, right? In order to more finely tune the balance between satisfaction and addiction to YouTube. right? Which is clicks and watches.
Yeah.
So all that gets totaled up, put into a single score for the video. And then in your suggested, they say, okay, you're watching this video, person in Detroit who is this, old on their mobile device. This is the number one video we predict that will satisfy you, right? Then that's at the top of suggested. Well, this is the second video in terms of overall scoring that we think will get both a combination of you clicking, watching, and being satisfied. And 3 and 4 and 5 and da-da-da-da-da. And that's how it comes out. And then from there, which is, true generally, it all gets fed back, right? So you see that little arrow at the top, right? Where it goes from serving over to user logs.
Yep.
Comes back into the system. Everything gets recalculated again. And it's just a process that goes on and on.
Okay, so we're saying at the top here, when this all gets sent over, then it's a giant recycle bin. If this arrow down goes all the way back, takes that information and plugs it back to the head of the funnel and starts processing it back through using what they've now learned about the viewer, what they've now learned about the video, what they've now learned about the performance of the connection when putting those things together.
Yep. So let's say your video ranked third, right? And you came up in the third spot, right? And the viewer said, ooh, actually, that's the one I want to watch. And they click on it. Well, that information goes back in, right? And to the point about that click-through rate bias, they're factoring that in, knowing that, oh, well, if we served this to 1,000 people, right, and had a greater click-through rate than the bias, well, let's now, they factor that in for each next impression, right?
Okay, so hold on one second. So in that position bias, we're saying we expect we're going to get X amount of clicks just because we pushed this towards the top, because we've suggested it more. So they start. So you're saying that they start looking at beyond that. Let's figure there's going to be what percentage of clicks just because we suggested it. We know just putting it there is going to make people go, if there's something, I didn't really want apple pie. I wanted cake, but you got apple pie you put in front of me. I'll take a slice. So there's some sort of numeric value where they go, all right, but when we know when we cross, we factor that in, that if we can remove a certain amount of percentage points for the fact that we put it there, we pay attention to the overflow, the overperformance beyond what we expected.
Yep. It factors into the weighting of how well that video did in its scoring.
Nice.
Right. And then that all just gets filtered back into the machine and run through this whole thing again. And so I think this started out as a question of what can a viewer do? Focus on click-through rate. And then we started, bitching and whining. Excuse me. This is my first curse on the stream. I'll let you know that it's an hour and 13 minutes in. But
number one,
essentially, right? It all gets factored in. But in terms of what viewers can do, click-through rate is number one, right? Yeah. Making those videos very tight and also entertaining or satisfying, information heavy, whatever it is that's going to keep people watching would absolutely be number two. Number three would be to essentially focus on topics that your audience and the audience you want are going to be interested in, and that there is scale for outside of your audience, right? So
stay there for 1 minute. So when we say first, there's scale for outside of your audience. So I make a video. Matt says, have you made a video that has scale for outside of your audience? I go, I'm in the bathroom. I have a scale. I can weigh it. Is that what you mean? So what are we talking about? We say there's scale for. So not all videos are created equal.
No. Let's say, let's talk about something interesting here. Let's say you are...
my thing. It's chicken recipes.
Chicken recipes
is my thing.
Let's say you make chicken recipes and you want to make, a chocolate chicken recipe, right? Well, there's probably not a ton of people interested in chocolate chicken. Right now, if you're an authority, and
This is why you don't cook.
In the chicken recipe space, right? Like, yeah, it could be interesting enough or creative enough that people are like, oh, yeah, I'm going to click on it, right? But there's no existing footprint of audience for that thing, right? And so if you're in the YouTube audience development space, right? Well, there's probably not a huge footprint of audience interested in, at least from what we've seen in our data, of like channel breakdowns, right? Like everyone says they're interested in it and then they don't click on it, right? Maybe it's a packaging thing. I don't know. We've taken several runs at it. People just don't seem to be interested in it. What they are very interested in is how to get more suggested video views, right? So we made a video called How to Get More Suggested Video Views, right? Now we put our take on it, right? And we had this paper that we could break down, right? But there's also lots of other videos out there about that topic that this video could be served against and suggested, right? There's also lots of people searching for this topic. And when we did the keyword research around it, right, we saw those other videos that were specifically on that topic, right? And so we said, okay, well, let's make our version of that. So because we know that there's potentially more audience for it based on what we're seeing in our own keyword research.
Okay. That I get. That makes a ton of sense. One of the questions that I kept getting in the question form, which brings it on home, and I appreciate your time here, Matt. You've been very patient with me.
All good. I'm just getting thirsty and my back hurts, so I have to walk around.
That's okay. You can move. You stay limber during this. We'll stretch afterwards. But the one thing I want to bring this home to, people are asking very simple questions. What should I really focus on? Because we said CTR, because they're asking, should I focus on my title, my tags, my thumbnail? I've always said that I feel that the title and the thumbnail and the topic that that you're talking about are sort of one thing. I call it the packaging. Like they all work together towards the CTR. So if there's someone out there going, okay, listen, you've explained to me that this whole deep process of understanding the viewer, the individual viewer, understanding the videos themselves and trying to gain more knowledge about the videos and then putting them through massive filters where they try to connect the two. And at the end, they go, listen, these two videos need to do a couple of things. They have to be able to serve the viewer, but they also have to meet our meeting our training expectations. And then we spit them right back to the top of the funnel and drop them through again. It just keeps recycling. If you had a couple of pieces of advice that you go, listen, knowing everything that we know about what you've learned through these papers and having served so many great channels and helped them drive so many billions of extra views, someone who's a smaller channel, it's going, listen, I've got so much in front of me. You guys gave me so much information. What can I do today? Where should I put the majority of my focus so that I can spend that time effectively and that I can grow my channel more rapidly, at least if I do these things correctly?
From like a nuts and bolts title, thumbnail, topic, right?
Okay. In that order?
No, thumbnail, topic, thumbnail, title. Okay. From a real standpoint, like if you want to actually grow on this platform, do something meaningful, stand out, become a star, right? The number one thing you can do is create a new type of content. Right. And if everyone just rolled their eyes and groaned, good. But what I mean by that is format, right? Like the thing that excites people the most is discovering something new, right? Like when reality TV started taking off, right? Like people just lost their fucking minds, right? People were like, these people are going to do what and say what? Like, it was huge. It was like they literally made hundreds and hundreds of reality show pilots coming on the heels of like real world road rules, MTV. Like, right. That was like the one that I think kind of like, everyone was like, oh, crap. And then it was Survivor and, right. Like it just blew up. Online video happens at like 100 times the rate of that. Right? Like there hasn't been a new like, oh God, everyone's going to do this since reality TV. Right? On YouTube, right? That happens at like light speed, right? So like in the beginning, it was like it was commentary and it was explainer videos, right? And then it was a little bit of like reaction style videos and the viral video stuff, right? Over time, that's evolved, and now we get, content from, he's such an easy example to go to because pretty much everyone's seen him. Actually, you know what? Let's not do Mr. Beast. Let's do David Dobrik, right? David Dobrik makes what you could call a vlog, right? But essentially, every video is a mix of formats, right? It's commentary, it's listicle, it's explainer, right? It's reaction, it's challenge, right? And the big drive overall is like him and his personality and his group of like crazy friends. But you don't get the same content every time, right? With Mr. Beast, right? Whenever he does like any of his like giveaway videos, there's usually challenge elements. There's definitely listicle elements to it, right? There's definitely reaction elements to it. And what essentially these amazing creators who have blown up on the platform have done, have taken existing formats, right, and mixed them together, added in their personality, right, added in some showmanship, right, and have entertained millions of people. And so the number one thing I would recommend people do if they really want to blow up on the platform beyond, thumbnails and titles and topic, average view duration, making good videos, is really sit down, think about your content, right? Is there something other than your wonderful personality, which I'm sure everyone is, right, that's going to drive the viewership here because it's going to show people something they haven't seen before? Even just a teeny tiny, like little teeny tiny twist on it will blow people's minds.
Well,
right?
that's big right there. So when you say do something, different, you're not necessarily saying, listen, I need to take you on the, an exploration of the surface of, Saturn. A lot of that is just, it's like almost as if, like, if you're in the kitchen, there's only so many meats, there's only so many spices. We're not looking for you to, come in with a unicorn and prepare that for dinner. We're just saying maybe come at the way that other things already exist, and maybe come at it at a new angle or at a small spin, make it feel fresh, make it feel slightly different. Is that fair?
That's exactly fair. And, I bring it up not to just do shameless self-promotion, but because it's the method we use and we teach people to use to come up with fresh content that doesn't look like every other piece of content, right? And it's the taxonomy of YouTube videos. It's completely free. You can watch the videos on our channel, or you can go to TubeFilter and read the article for free. But it's the most important work I've ever done, and there's not a single statistic or data point in it. And it is unbelievably valuable because what it does is it breaks down popular, I think the only content formats that are used in digital video, breaks them down into their elements so that you can remix them and reformat them and put them together like different puzzle pieces that all fit together but can make beautifully different pictures, right? And it breaks it down in a systematic fashion because, like, being creative and being a creative genius, and I'm not saying I am, is fantastic. And there are some people that can operate that way, but I can't, right? I need a system. I need a box, right? Tell me the box I'm playing in. And so after years and years and years of creating, thousands and thousands of videos and developing multiple shows that have generated millions and millions of views, like, I got tired of being the one that had it in his head, right? And listening to people pitch ideas that have been done to death. Like, holy crap, I don't want to see someone else just play a video game, right? I don't want another listicle, right? And so, like, when I would be managing teams and talking about, like, well, what kind of content are we going to create? I got tired of saying no. And so I wrote this framework for thinking about how to develop fresh and unique content based on what's come before it, because all innovation is either a response to or a riff on what has come before it, right? So in that way, like, this gives you the framework in which to do that. So I would highly encourage people go and read it. It's not dense. It's super simple. It is dense, but it's super simple to understand and read. And it comes with wonderful examples. And so, in that way, I would say that would be the number one thing I would encourage people to do, is read that article and think about your content. Am I making just another explainer? Am I making another listicle? And is there something I can do from a format perspective that is going to allow my content to stand out from everyone else's?
Nice. So same ingredients, thinking about how we can just change the recipe a little bit.
Absolutely. Make that chocolate chicken.
Listen, Matt, I can't thank you enough for hurting your back and spending this much time with me and letting me abuse you in this way and stopping you in the middle of a nice roll where usually people don't interrupt you, but I do. I've got the video that we were referencing about the papers that Matt broke down linked in the description. I've got links to Matt's channel, Little Monster Media Co., linked down in the description. Please check all of those things out. Please subscribe to Matt, and I will add in the replay after we're done here when this goes back up. I'll make sure that Matt's taxonomy of YouTube information is down there too, so you can look at the very topics that he's broken down that do well across the platform, and maybe you have a list of ingredients that you can start thinking about your next recipe and finding some success on the platform that maybe you haven't, just by changing up the way you're putting some of the herbs and spices together. Sound good?
Absolutely, man. Thank you very much for having me on. It's always fun. I love being interrupted by you. Not a problem whatsoever. I appreciate it. And thanks for letting me jump back on after a few technical difficulties.
We survived. All right, listen, everybody, thank you so much. We appreciate you hanging out. Make sure you check all the links in the descriptions, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. Check out Matt's channel.
Thanks.